something for you.
Gentlemen, you can't fight in here. This is the war room.
Hello everybody and welcome back to the Hilltop Pillbox here in Abbotsford, British Columbia, Canada. And today we're going to do a little video, and you probably won't be seeing this video for a few days. I'm going to do one on the map and a little bit on the cards and whatnot first. And as I learn it more, I will teach you more. And so it might be about a week that this particular series is in production. But by the time I get through it, you should know everything you need to know to sit down and play yourself some War Room. Again, this is the one that I got. That's the Larry Harris Signature Edition, of which there were only a couple hundred. And I was fortunate enough to be gifted this by Young Grasshopper, who tried to give it to Jorn Orpdahl out in Norway. And he already had it. So he suggested that it should come to the Hilltop Pillbox, for which we are ever so grateful. And Moffett Field helped supply the transportation costs because, as you know, we got this as well as the Jumbo Pack Expansion, which is a box of similar size and heft. So I'm not even sure what the shipping was, but in Canada, yeah, it's expensive. So I wouldn't be surprised if it was well over $100 to ship it. So thanks to YG and Jorn and Moffett Field for just the real generosity there. And so my goal is to be able to give you some good videos on this game. It's a beautiful game, and it looks like a lot of fun. I haven't been able to play it yet. By the time you watch this, maybe I will have. But for right now, I'm just learning the game myself. It does come with a really nice rule book, and the game itself, if you've been into more complex games, maybe the historical board gaming's 1936, this one is going to come to you much more simply. The depth of the rules and the interaction between the nations is very, very interesting in this game, but there are only 7 playable nations, and it starts once the war is underway. As you can see, Germany already has France and a bunch of Eastern Europe. Italy is well entrenched here. Germany and Italy have North Africa. And of course the Japanese have taken over good chunks of the territory. All the money islands. And they're at I believe they're set to be at the zenith of their power in this game. All of the Pacific Islands and their reaches way out there to Wake. So we'll see if there is any more that I can find out about that. But I believe that this is right at the zenith of the Axis power. We can see over here, although it's not technically correct, I know they probably wanted to give a little bit of space between here and what is essentially Stalingrad, there in Volgograd, the Volga River, of course. And and they of course didn't take Leningrad. So, but let's go over the map a little bit here. So this is the whole map. When you play some scenarios, you'll take away this half of the map and just play with this half. Sometimes you'll take away this, this, and this and just play with this section here. When you play the introductory stuff, I mean, there's a whole bunch of different iterations that you can come up with. They give you 4, excuse me, at the very beginning of in the book, in the rule book, they give you 4 different scenarios to set up, and you can take a look at those from the rule book. Oh, the islands. These confuse some people apparently early on, so I'll just help you out here. This is all considered land. All right. So, for instance, if you did have, a fighter here and it wanted to fly to here and land on a carrier or whatever, that doesn't really happen in this game. I'll talk about that later. But if you wanted to move, maybe ships or something, from here to here is 1. You don't have to go from here into the water is 1, and then, like most Axis and Allies games where you have to, go into the water and then you're into the deep blue. That's not what we're doing there. So it's all considered just land. This is just all considered land. They just do the circles to denote the islands, and you can see that probably gets pretty important out there in the Pacific. Probably not so much in the Atlantic. And in the Med as well. Lots of stuff in the Med. We'll just head over here to Moscow. It's right in front of us. And you can see those things. Of course, you start with the flag, denoting the ownership of, and it's a capital city, so it's got the flag there. R1. All of the countries, or pardon me, the territories owned by the Soviet Union will begin with an R. You can see R6, you got R4, R3, R2 for Archangel. These just denote the actual zone. There's nothing to do with the importance of it or the power of it. The one might, I believe it denotes the capital of all of them, but after that I think all bets are off. Just kind of goes 2, 3, what is it? Where is 2? Sorry, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So you can see they just carry on. Britain has the most. They start with 30. Japan starts with 28. And Russia has 18. Everybody else is a little shy of that. Germany, I think, is 16. With Madagascar, believe it or not. Back to the map here. The 5 that you see here is it's kind of the importance of the place. It's called the stability level, stress level, stability level. It's what the territory is worth to that particular nation. And you want to hang on to those, because when you lose them, you get stress. And stress is a bad thing. I'll be talking about that later in a future video. So, for instance, if we look at Germany, you can see Greater Germany is worth 8. France is worth 6, so that's a spicy meatball. But the Baltic states, it's only a 1. So if they fall, not so big a deal. And the next two here, we've got a blue 1 and a yellow 1. And if we look at Greater Germany, there's also you see the red 1, a blue 2, and a yellow 3. Well, those all denote resource values. Now, in most other games we play of this genre, the World War II genre, is all the territories have an IPC or an IPP value, industrial production, and what they've done with War Room, if they've broken that down into 3 main segments. So we have oil, iron, and OSR, which means other strategic resources. So that probably references food production, probably cotton, other metals that you would use, probably energy production, all that sort of stuff. And then you have these, I guess I shouldn't put that out of the way, then you have this nifty little pegboard, and this just sits in the box, on top of the box where you keep all of your units. All right. So on the map, if you were to take all of these numbers and add them up, so even if we just took the easy one is typically oil, it's usually the one with the least amount. You have 1 here for Germany, you got another 1, that's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So Germany starts with 6 oil. And you say, well, come on, Hilltop, that's a lot of looking around a map and adding up stuff. Well, you don't really need to do that, because each territory, I mean, on here you've got the black triangles that tells you where to set up. I think that's for the global game. But each territory also has a card, right? And here are these cards, and you can see the name, you can see the flag of who owns it first. You can see, so for Germany, we've got the flag and the G1. You'll see an 8, 1, 2, 3, and we see an 8, 1, 2, 3. All right, so they match right up. Okay. Also, Germany, beside Greater Germany, it's got that yellow star. That just denotes that it's a capital. Now, these cards kind of come and go. So, you know, if the Allies came by and took Denmark, this card here would then go to the country that took Denmark. Okay? But until that time, it'll stay in here and provide the other strategic resources for the Germans. These things here do get filled up. The German one starts full, and you know they're going to be taking places. So they have to have another one. And they have some nondescript ones that you can use. Okay? And in order to use these, my hand's got the camera in it right now, but you just gently push on the back, You can see that that opens, and you just slide the card into the slot, and you got yourself another one. So as I was saying before, some other countries already start with a lot. So Russia has its own. It's got the Soviet flag here, but it also needs to start with a second one because it's got 2 extra cards. America doesn't have that much to start with. Britain, lots and lots and lots and lots and lots, so they have almost 2 full cards. China, of course, doesn't have a lot. Italy, of course, doesn't have a lot. But then the Japanese, they have a lot. Now, you'll notice that a lot of them don't have anything on them. They're not really worth an awful lot. But on the map, they are launching out points to do invasions and whatnot. So they do have their strategic value. It's just not denoted by a white box. All right. Also, looking at the board here, you see all these smokestacks and everything, showing you all sorts of neat stuff. These smokestacks, as I've gone around and looked, they seem to add up to the same number as the level of the importance of the country, the stress level of the country, and that is equal to the smokestacks, which tells you that's how many units can be produced there on any given turn. Okay? So for instance, Ukraine, you could place 4 there and 2 there, so there's 6 right on the border of the Russians right off the bat. Russians, of course, can only produce 5 on the border of German soil, nothing to be produced here, but you can see it's an oil-rich territory. And there's rails. You can move stuff back and forth with rail. I'll be talking more about that in another video. Another thing that comes up quite a bit in many of the games are, well, how do you use canals and those narrow choke points? Well, here you can see that Egypt is now just a single territory, and the Suez Canal runs in Egypt. There's not one on each side. I think Transjordan in the Axis and Allies is typically there, and you have to own both to go through. Well, in this iteration, you just need to own Egypt. Okay. As we look at Gibraltar, though, we see Gibraltar's got a red line across the entrance to the Med, but it's got only a dot on one side, which means you only need to own where that dot is. So, if you own Gibraltar, you can open or close the Med at will. Same with Malaya and Sumatra. You just need to own Malaya to move ships through that area. And if other people want to, they have to ask your permission. Typically, you'll say no, of course. And the other one here is Denmark and Norway. You see there's a dot on either side. That means you need to own both sides. You have to have you have to own Norway and Denmark in order to travel through the Danish Straits. The last one is the Panama Canal, which of course is similar to Egypt. You just need to own that territory. Something else I want to talk about are the neutrals. Neutrals are very simple in this game. You can't go into them. If you do, I mean, you can, I guess. They have a standing army, just 3 infantry in Arabia. It's not a big deal. Swedes have a bit more. Spain has even more. Portugal's got some infantry there. But if you go in as the Axis, then the Allies will now, all these guys will turn pro-Allied. They still have to go there, but they won't have to fight the standing army. So do it at your own peril, but you'll see that there is a symbol there of an oil. And if we go here, there's one that's iron. And then as we go over to, say, Colombia, we see the other strategic resources, food and cotton and whatnot. Okay. You can then trade with any of the neutrals. All right, now we're going to talk about trade, and this shouldn't take too long, but there have been some questions about it, and I just want to make sure it's nice and clear. Once per round, this is during phase 7, right near the end, you have the ability to trade with a neutral partner, or a neutral country, pardon me. But there are some rules about that. First is you got to have access to it. Access means that the enemy doesn't control that territory. If the enemy controls that territory, you are out of luck. But if you are next door to that territory in a free zone that's not embattled, you can trade with it as well. So in our little scenario here, the Germans have been able to land some troops, the British are here. This is embattled, which means that the Guyanas, which used to be just a nice British hotspot, go and get malaria, is now embattled, which means that the British can no longer use this to trade. So then the British say, well, that's okay, we'll trade overseas, and we'll trade with our mighty Royal Navy. Well, that'll work great as long as the Germans haven't blockaded. So the Germans say, you know what, we think that the British want iron. And so what we're going to do is we're going to bring our Bismarck down here. We're going to plant it in A13 because that's where the port is that the British would be able to trade with Brazil. So they put that there. Now the British can't trade iron there. Well, unfortunately for the Germans, the British have a port that they can access in Mexico, which is a pro-Allied port, pro-Allied country, and so they can get their iron there. And the Americans could trade because you can't block this. The only way that this could get blocked would be if the Germans came over here and took it over. Then the Americans would not have access to it. But we're not going to say the Germans are quite that ambitious. All right, now the trading happens very simply in this way. You can either get 2 oil, 3 iron, or 5 OSR for one of the other numbers that are there. So I may not have described that too well. But in phase 7, what you're going to do is you're going to put your numbers down of your existing resources, and you've got 5 oil, 7 iron, and 15 OSR, and you say, you know what, we need some oil. So you're going to do a plus, circle the plus there, and a 7, because you're getting +2, so your 5 is going to become a 7, and you're trading away 5 OSR, so your 15 is going to drop to a 10. So that's what this looks like here, is that you're going to trade away 5 OSR, so it's going to go from 15 all the way down to 10, and the oil is going to go up to 7. And now you have set your resources at the correct spot. Again, this happens in step 2 of phase 7, and then you carry on with your purchases and all the rest. So hopefully that is clear. You can't trade or use this a zone that's embattled to trade, and you must have a clear point of access between something you own and what you're wanting to trade with. So if the Bismarck weren't here but it were here, then the British could trade iron here. Even though this is embattled, they can get to it via sea. And then again, if this were not embattled at all, then the British could use the Guyanas to trade here and here. Colombia, they'd be able to trade through here. Now the Axis, they have a little bit of a restriction. The green colored countries will not trade with the Axis because they are pro-Allied. So if you are Germany, Italy, or Japan, you have some severe restrictions because they carry a lot of neat stuff. You can find your oil in other places like Saudi Arabia and Venezuela. You can find it elsewhere, but a lot of the other stuff, a lot of the iron and whatnot is in friendly to the Allies territories. So just keep that in mind. Well, hopefully that makes sense to you, and that is the world of trading in War Room. One minor addition to that is that if someone does capture, let's say they capture Colombia, Colombia will now no longer trade with the Allies. Okay? They'll no longer trade with the Allies, and if it were like this, they would no longer trade with the Axis. So whichever faction captures it, the other side will not be able to trade with that country. Just thought I'd throw that in there. Alright, now we're going to talk about convoy raiding, and there's 2 different types. You have the convoys that go between 2 countries, and it's got an American flag on this one. And essentially the Allies need to own Eastern US and Archangelisk, probably said that wrong, which is right here. So they need to own both of those in order to be able to raid this convoy. These convoys here you just want to raid an enemy port. They're all attached to ports, and so you're going to raid the ports. So the British are here in A15, and if the Germans still own France and the Germans still own French Morocco, they have a choice. They can either raid this zone or this zone, but they can only raid one. Okay? Each command can only raid one. So if the British had two different stacks in here, they could have one go there and they could have one go there, but they can't attack both with one command. So since red is tough to roll, and blue and yellow are a little easier to roll, we're going to have them attack there. Now all you do, this is so simple, is you take one die per ship or aircraft. So the British could have as well, you know, bring out a bomber or a fighter because they can move two. And you put the little token on them there. Okay. And then you grab your dice. Okay. So we add up the number of things that are attacking this. So we have 2 cruisers, 2 subs, and a bomber, so that's 5. So we put those in there. And then we just shake. And we have greens, yellows, blacks, and blues. So here we go. For each yellow, this port loses 1 OSR. So the Germans, who are here, would lose 1 OSR for each yellow rolled. So they'd lose 1. And then they would lose any blues. So they lose 1 for blue. So they lose an iron. But then you have a black. Now the black can be applied to either of these. And typically you would choose the blue because they're tougher to come by. You could not choose red because there is no red in there. Okay. Now had the British decided to attack this one, then they could use a black to take away an oil. Okay. So that's convoy raiding. You don't get a medal for that. Okay. So you just put this in here to let everybody know what's happening. And then at the end of the turn, this guy will go back and this comes off. Okay. So that's convoy raiding. Pretty quick and easy. Pretty simple. There you go. At the middle of the board, and it's kind of upside down, so I'll turn my camera as best I can. You see the turn order. That is decided at the beginning of each round. And what you do is you bid oil. So, for instance, here's Germany, and Germany has 6 oil to start with. They could bid 6, woohoo! But they wouldn't. But whoever bids the most can decide when he or she would like to go in the turn. And then you place all the roundels. There's little national roundels that go there, and they'll go in that order. The importance of that is that while combat is simultaneous, movement is not. And I can actually stop you from moving some units if I move first. And we'll talk more about that in another video. But that's why turn order is right on the board, and it changes every round. Or it can change every round. It might stay the same. One very minor note, this is going to have no effect on my gameplay or anything, but just something happened when I was putting the game together, because you're given all of these plastic pieces, and then on the other side you put your national stickers on. And in every game I've ever played, and even on the map here, you can see that Italy is kind of a bright green, and America is typically their drab olive green. So I just started slapping on the stickers for the American fleets, and I quickly realized that there weren't enough stick pieces, because they give you enough to set up for what each country can have, and America's got enough for like 8 fleets or something, and Italy only has 4. And so I started slapping them on, and lo and behold, there's that. The light green are meant for America, and the drab green are meant for Italy, and I didn't realize that until it was too late. Now that's just in my set, because in my set the bright green, this is all USA, even though it's in a drab green box, and the drab green is in the bright green box. So they gave me enough to outfit the Italians in their drab green. So I think it just got kind of maybe mixed up at the factory. So it's not going to cause any grief whatsoever for the gameplay that I have, you know, fleets that are of different color than the air and the ground units. But just when you get yours, just maybe take a peek and make sure that you got the right numbers, so you end up not with the problem I have, where I've got, you know, two American fleets that have different colored things. Now again, as you're looking down on them, you typically only see the flag and then all the ships underneath. You're not going to really focus on the edge. So it's not a big deal to me. I just thought I'd point it out in case there's some real purists out there who are going to lose their mind if they see that. Okay, just thought I'd mention that to you. All right, now we're going to talk about the unit movement limits, and these are very simple, and gosh, I love how they got this set up here. So very simply, the sea to sea, because that's all the boats can do, they can move up to 2 adjacent sea regions. End of story. Land to land, you can go 1 adjacent land or unlimited unblocked rail. All right, of course that's if you don't have the dysfunctional infrastructure we've talked about a couple of times. All right, so if that's happened, of course you can't use your rail. And unblocked means that if there is an enemy unit or if it has been bombed, that you can't use it. So we have, you know, maybe there's a bomb token there, and the Russian player can no longer send things this way via rail. So they can just go 1 land unit. Okay. But land to sea, so if you want to send land units to sea, it can go 1 or 2 regions only if both moves are into sea. Okay, we're going to talk about that in a second. Sea to land, 1 adjacent, so you can basically hop onto land and you're done. Sea to sea, you can go 2 regions. And the airplanes are going to move twice, or have the ability to move twice, but only if you give them orders. This isn't like most other games where you have combat and non-combat moves. It's essentially what these are, but you can't not... what's the best way to say this? If you didn't move it in the combat phase, you can't move it in the non-combat phase. How about that? And then the carrier fighters, that's another thing we'll talk about. It's pretty simple. All right. Here we go. We're going to show you an example of this. So here is kind of a fantastic arrangement of things. And you write down, of course, the number of the stack and where you're wanting it to go to. So as we know, land units can move 1 adjacent for Pete's sake, 1 adjacent space, or they can move 2, but only into sea. So I couldn't go 1 and invade France. Can't do that. Okay, so you can go 1, but you can head down here. Then the next turn you could invade France. Okay, so you come down here. So you write the orders that you're going to have 28 to A15. Pretty simple. But you know that these things here are just transports. They're completely vulnerable. And hey, there's a stack of 7 U-boats sitting here. So you're going to want to protect them. You'd write the 18th is going to fly there. And then what you do is you put this on top of it, so that at the end of the battle you can give orders to it to get out of the water. Meanwhile, we're also going to move this bad boy to here. It's 1 space, no problem. And then if the Germans have written orders to come into here, well, you're going to have yourself a little bit of a tussle. And as interesting as that will be, we will avoid that for now. We will show you a naval battle, don't worry. All right, so that's movements, and then when that happens, when you have 2 warring nations, warring against each other that is, you put in a hotspot marker, and if one side gets completely destroyed, then of course the winners, get a medal. Okay. So at the end of this battle, if the German U-boat fleet is gone, they get a medal. And then these folks here can now fly up to 2 spaces again. So they could head home, they could go land in Gibraltar, and then you would take this off. And they could sit there forever, or you can give them orders again next round, and off they go. And they can move 2 spaces. Okay. So that's movement into the water and the air. The land, it's pretty simple. Again, you can only go 1 space. All right. You can only go 1 space unless you have unlimited rail. And if the British are railing across Europe, things aren't going so well for the Axis. Okay, as you can see here, we have a single order happening. I'm just going to show you what happens with merging. All right, so here we have the 48th and the 22nd, and the 48th has a lot more stuff than the 22nd. And so what we're going to do is we're going to merge, because let's say the Germans had orders in all of these here, and they didn't have enough orders to tack on the 22nd as well. Maybe they had fleets of U-boats doing a bunch of movement and convoying, and convoy is not an order, by the way, it just happens automatically when you're in there, but maybe you know, you're moving a bunch of stuff around and you really want to grab you know, that tank, this armor that's on the bottom of 22, and you want to take it with you wherever you're going. So what happens is, after you've done your economy stuff and you've gathered all the resources and all that kind of thing, then you're doing your strategic planning. So you write your orders and turn order bids, and you announce mergers and splits. Okay, so a merger is very simply what it sounds like. You take stuff, you can take a whole stack if you want. You can take the whole stack and just say, I'm adding it to this stack here. And if I had a third hand, I'd probably be able to make the stack nicer, but then there you go. You can stack it up there. All right, and then when it says 48 to G5, we can go G4 down to G5. There's G5, and everybody's happy, and you can move a whole whack of stuff like that. All right, so that's a merger, and it's just that simple. All right, fight, fight, fight. Here we're going to do a little mock battle, and we'll show you the ins and outs of the fighting. There are three phases, two that are used a lot and one that is rarely used, but will be used during the game, so you need to hear about it here. There is the air phase. So that's everything up in here is a target during the air phase. So during the air phase, only these units can die. So only red and green dice are going to have any effect, plus possibly black and white. We'll talk about that in a second. That's the air phase. That's the first one. The second phase you do is the strategic bombing phase. And that is where, if you've placed any bombers into the top shelf here, you can use them to damage a number of different things. You can go after resources. You can go after the products, the units that are under construction under there. And you can also go after, well, you can go after, pardon me, ships. You can go after planes. It doesn't have to just be infantry. I just have infantry there. Or you can also deplete the oil, OSR, the iron. Those are the resources, but you can only deplete what's there, of course. So since there's no red, you can't deplete any oil from Bryansk. The other thing you can do is you can damage the infrastructure. And this happens right away. So if you have a successful bombing raid, you would then place this here. And that means that you've damaged the infrastructure. And what that does is it stops the rail from being used. And you can also knock down the production by 1 permanently, each bomb token that is here. Okay? So bombing can really have an effect. And bomb tokens are never taken away. That's kind of the worst problem, especially if Germany comes here and bombs it. Great, good for them. But when they take it over, that bomb token remains. So bomb tokens are permanent. So just be careful there. Essentially, what that means is that it eliminates a smokestack. So if you have one of those, this can only now produce 1 unit instead of 2. If 2 of them drop on it, that effectively knocks it out for the game. So that's kind of crazy. Don't let people bomb you to death. But again, if you do, you're kind of, if you're wanting to take over that territory, you're kind of hosing yourself because now you can't use it. The other things you can do is go after the port advantage. They're functional, but you lose the port advantage. And we're going to talk about the port advantage when we do a sea battle. I didn't choose a place with a port here because I just wanted to focus on land and air. Okay, so that's the second phase, is the strategic bombing phase. And then the third phase is the land phase. That's where everything here now becomes a target. And just to try to keep it clear, the first couple little battles we had, we were having a little trouble, and then we realized, oh, so in the first round, this stuff gets wiped out. The second round, if you do have strategic bombing, it only goes after this stuff. And in the third round, only this stuff can be affected. All right? So it's not what's firing, it's what's being fired upon that will be affected. So in the first round, this stuff here gets fired upon. Second round, this gets fired upon. And in this round, this stuff gets fired upon. It's the only stuff that can be lost. So the first thing you have to do is figure out how many dice you're going to be using. And in order to find that, they've put these huge circles here. Right? And then any unit that is along the lines that has these white circles on it, you simply multiply it by the number of units and the circle. So up here it's all 1, right? So this is easy. So this gets 1 versus air. This bomber gets 1 versus air because it's up flying around. It's got machine guns on it blasting away. But then you got a fighter that's doing an air battle, so it gets 3 dice. Okay. Then we also have tanks, and tanks who are on defensive stance, so they're sitting there waiting. We're going to give them 1 die. Yeah, you never know, they might get lucky. And then you got anti-airs. So for the Germans, you know, you got the Venerable 88 there, and it's on anti-air, and it gets 2 dice. So for each of these, they get 2. For each of these, they get 1. For each of these, they get 3, and then 1 and 1. So let's go ahead and add that up. We have 1. Because we have 1 bomber, another bomber is 2, a fighter is 3. So that's 1, 2, that's 5 total dice. Come down here, we've got a tank here, so that's 6. We've got anti-aircraft here, so that's 8. So what you do is you take one of these handy-dandy battle markers and you just sit it beside the 8. Alright, so that's how many dice Germans are going to roll for the anti-air. So that can only go after that. Okay. Now, we're going to look at the Russians, and the Russians here have a lot of stuff, but not much doing anti-air, but we'll count it up. So we got 3, and then we have no tanks on defensive stance, but we do have 2 anti-air guns at 2 apiece. So that's 2, 4. Okay, so 2, 4, and 3 is 7. So we're going to take one of these here and put it right here for the defense. So the Germans will have 8 dice. The Russians will have 7. The only colors that affect air battles, the first round, the only colors are red and green. And as we look at the dice, there is 1 red, 1 green, and another green, and that's it. So it's a 1 in 6 to get a hit on an air unit, and a 1 in 12 to get a hit on a red air unit. So bombers, they're more expensive. They can do some neat things, of course, and they really bring it with the ground attack. We're going to talk about that in a second. But boy, if you get that 1 in 12 hit, which we've all gotten, then yeah, that's ouch. So they get 8. So we're going to have your dice set up in stacks of 10. It's really handy because you roll in 10, because you're going to have more than 10 dice. You can have up to 30 dice in one battle. So I'm going to pour that into there. So this is the air battle. Here we go. I couldn't do that if there were pieces here, by the way. So make sure you have a place that you can roll your dice. All right, so it's only red and green that we are worried about right now. And so as we look here, we've got these 2. Now you see, oh, there's a white die. Yes, there is. We'll talk about those in just a second. All right, so we have a red. There's nothing in the red, so that die goes away. Green, well, we do have the green. It's going to move 1 space here. Now, because it's here, at the end of the Soviet turn, you'd be able to repair it by spending 1 resource of any type, but it's typically going to be your OSR because they're the most frequently made. Unfortunately, though, for the Russian, the Germans also got a white die. And again, these battle boards are made up beautifully. The white triangles here tell you that you can roll a white or green die to affect this. And so that white die is now going to finish this thing off. It's going to go here, and it is done. And so the Germans, with their 8 dice, only got 2 hits. But that's all they needed to finish off the Russian fighter. But again, this is all simultaneous. So now the Russians get to reply with 7 dice, and I know I have them in stacks of 10, so when I put those 3 there, I have 7 here, but always count anyway, but there's 7. So you throw them in there. We'll do that, and lift that up. Oh, look at this. So we got a red and a green. Okay. Now you say, well, the German would probably choose this one, because then you can still do the strategic bombing. Nope. It's the person who rolled the dice gets to choose the casualties. The green casualty, whoop, where did my dice go that I got hit? Oh, there. So my green casualty and a red casualty, all the other dice mean nothing. That is chosen by the Russian player. So the Russian's obviously going to choose that one. Then he's got a choice. Am I going to do ground or strategic bombing? Well, it's Bryansk, and we know that Bryansk is probably going to be taken by the Germans. And what strategic bombing does is it goes after certain things. We'll talk about them in a second. But if the Germans end up winning this, then they might not want to have it. So what they're going to do is they're going to damage this one. Now, that really doesn't change anything because everything against the air units is done. Okay? Everything against the air units is done. So even if this was over here, it could still do its strategic bombing raid. Alright? So that's it for the air. The air is done. All these white dots and all the units that are on the white do not shoot again this round. Okay? Unless they have a ground target as well, which we will talk about. Which actually they all do, so disregard. Except for this fighter. This fighter is not going to be attacking on the ground. Alright, now we're going to go on to the second phase, and the second phase is strategic bombing. Okay, so you have air, then you have strategic bombing. It's rare in this game. Not really rare, but it seems to be rare, because bombers are pretty pricey, and, you know, like I say, the couple of red dice, or a red die, and, you know, had the Russians gotten a white, that probably would have gotten rid of this bomber, and it's a pretty expensive hit. But on the strategic bombing, it's very simple. You can see that for strategic bombing, they get 4 dice. You get 4 dice per bomber. So you're going to roll that in there. Then as the German player has to say what he or she is strategically bombing. Okay? And these little bomb tokens here are going to get placed if it is successful. So we'll talk about it here in a second. So if they want to bomb the infrastructure, they want to go after the rail. They want to go after the ports, if it was in a port area. These ports here, we'll talk about them in a moment. They can go after resources, but only the ones that are in there. So they can go after iron and other strategic resources, but not oil. They can also go after things that are being constructed. So here we have a couple of infantry being constructed, because the limit is 2, and you know they're cheap, so the Russians are chucking them in there, hoping that they'll be there. But let's say that the German player says, I don't want these guys popping up next round or at the end of this round, so I'm going to try to kill them. So then, what you do, roll the dice. Oh, that's not good. So we got 3 yellows, and there are only 2 yellows here, so that would take these guys, and they would be put onto the eliminated part. They have been destroyed this round, which is pretty sad, but that's the realities of strategic bombing. Just checking on one of the little nuances of the game. The ports and rails and the infrastructure, if you roll a white or a black, it could destroy or damage all infrastructure, but a black can also deplete any one resource. It's a wild. Black is kind of wild in this game, all right? It's a wild color, and you can apply it to so many different things. So you could deplete a resource, you could destroy any one unit under construction, or you can damage all the infrastructure and place the bomb token in there. So the black dots on the dice are very, very, very effective at ruining someone's day. Right, now we're going to talk about the ground battle. All right, now there's a couple of things I haven't spoken about yet, which now is the time to do. One, you can have different nations attacking and defending together, because everything in a territory will do its thing. And so if you have German and Italians, let's say, in the same territory, and that's just, it happens, then you got to keep them separate. Oh, please keep them separate. Okay, if you bunch them all up, you don't know who's taking the hits, and it's very important. You have to keep very close track of who's taking the casualties, and you'll find out why at the end of this scenario. Okay, but for right now, let's just go ahead and add up how many things are going against the land. Actually, we're going to do that first. The surface battle stage only. This is called force advantage. You'll hear about this quite a bit. So surface battle stage only. For the side with the fewer land types, blacks and whites become misses. That's sort of like eliminating that and that. It's like taking away 2 of 12, or 1/6 of your die is now ineffective. So that doesn't happen here because both groups have 3 types. But for instance, if the Russians couldn't cobble together any sort of armor, now when the Russians defend, they're now defending even worse, right? It's just sad. So, if it's kind of like a kick them when they're down game. Right? If you can go after somebody, if you have a choice to attack someone like maybe he's got 20 infantry and 1 tank and 1 artillery, or you can go after somebody who's got 5 infantry, 3 artillery, and no tanks, or I'm just making up numbers, but essentially against somebody who doesn't have as many types as you do, that might be the way to go, because then their blacks and whites become no good at all on their die rolls. So let's look here now at the ground, and let's get that number going. So we just know that these both, there's no force advantage. Everybody's got combined arms, I guess might be another way to say it. If you've ever played Fortress America, that comes into it as well, right? Combined arms when attacking a city or mountain territory. You get easier dice rolls. Okay, there's a reward, I guess, for bringing in a variety of things. So the Soviet player just can't crank out men and not worry about it. You'll probably want to keep these things around as much as possible. All right, now, placing these things is very interesting because you have to make sure that you've got them doing what you want them to do. We've seen that the defensive and the anti-air helped kill this Russian fighter. Okay, that was great. But now when they fire at the ground, they're only going to get 1 die instead of the ground getting 2. And instead of these offensive tanks getting 4 dice, this guy only gets 2. So you can see you're kind of splitting your force a little bit. But there is a good thing for it. When you're defensive, that means when you get hit, you go back 1 space. Then you got to get hit again to go back to the damaged zone. And you got to get hit a 3rd time to be destroyed. Okay, so it's 3 hits to kill that tank. Okay, these guys here though, it's 1, 2, and they're done. Okay, so it's easier to kill these ones than it is these ones, but these also punch harder. So you have to ask yourself, what's worth it to me? Same with the infantry. These infantry are on the offensive charge, and they get 2 dice each. These guys are defensive. They only get 1 dice each, but they also take 2 hits to die. All right? So you got to ask yourself, what do you want to do? Okay, and again, keep these separate. I almost messed up there. Okay, keep these separate. So as we look at the Russian sense of doing things, these are the guys who died in the strategic bombing. The Russians are wanting to hurt the Germans as much as possible on this, but they're probably going to lose a lot of guys doing it. Okay, so we'll see how this works out for them. All right, so for the land, what's going on with the land? Well, this guy here, he's going to roll 4 dice. This guy's not going to roll any, so we've got 4. There's no fighter doing a ground attack. So we have 4. We've got 2 more here is 6. We've got 2 at 4, which is 8. So 6 plus 8 is 14. We have 1, 15, 2, 17. And we've got 3 at 1. So 17 plus 3 is 20. And then we've got 2 at 3 here, or 3 at 2, I guess. So that's another 6. So that's 26. You're saying, well, you've only got one of these things. Well, simply put, we put that there, and put that there. Now, some people also do it this way, where you put, this is your 10 multiplier. So you got 26. Okay. Now on the Soviet side, let's see what they got left. Of course, he's out of action, and there's nothing else in the air for the Russians, so they don't get any of these. But we've got some tanks here, 2 at 4. So 2 at 4 is going to give them 8. We have 2 at 1, so that's 2, so that's 10. We've got 1 here for 11. So that's 11 for them. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 at 2 is 14. They get 25 dice. 25 dice. Well, that's pretty impressive. Okay, so 25. All right, does that make sense? Hopefully it does. All right, and you can see that we've included the Italians and the Germans all together here. Okay, that's not a problem. That's how you roll, as they say. So we're going to grab our 10 dice here, and we're going to do 2 rolls of 10 and 1 round of 6, and we'll do the injuries after each roll of 10 dice. So here we go. Whoop, come here, you. There we go. Whoa, lots of white dice here. Only 1 yellow, a couple of green. Oh, the Germans really put the boots to them here. No misses at all, no reds. All right, so we have, adjusting for all these results here, we are going to assign damage. Let's see here. All right, so we resolve from the bottom to the top. So we'll start with the yellows, and there's only 1 yellow hit. And so that kind of makes it easy. I'm going to kill that thing, okay? This one here doesn't participate in the battle. This should actually be out on the morale board, the casualty board, but I just wanted to put it here so you'll see it get transferred, okay? It's not, these guys aren't going to roll because they weren't quite made yet. All right, so that's 1 yellow. So that die goes back in there. And then we got 4 blue. Well, that makes it pretty easy. So we've got 1, and again, you can't put another one in the casualty box. You have to keep going. 2, and then 3, and then 4. Okay. And then we have 2 green and 3 white. So we got 1, 2 green. Okay. Now we got 3 white. Unfortunately, there's nothing in the white zone for the Germans to use. So that's all the damage they could do in this round, was killing these 4 units. But that's with 10 dice. Lots more dice coming. Well, the Russian commander sure didn't like that. So he's going to take the 10 dice, and he's going to shoot back. So you go back and forth between the 2 commands. Oh, we got a black die, we got a red die. Fortunately, there's nothing that's going to get killed with a red die, because there's no units that are red. That's only for air and sea. All right, so we've got, oh, not a lot of yellow again. It's a very interesting round of rolling here. So we go, we got that, and then we got that. All right, so we got 1 yellow. So the Russian's going to make that an easy choice, insta-kill. Now we got 3 blue. And artillery, 1, 2, and now the third choice is obviously, it doesn't matter because the Germans, they've already counted up the dice. They're not going to lose any dice from this, so they get to kill. So that's the 3. And now we have 2 green, and we don't like German tanks running around, so we'll go 1, 2. But that's not a good idea. We're going to do 1 green here. We're going to do 1 green here. Now the reason we did that is because we got 2 whites and a black. Okay? So the white can do that. Another white can do that. And then, again, they've already counted up all the dice, so it doesn't really matter. It's got to be a ground unit, though. We'll do that. So you can see with the 10 dice, we have an identical result, even though we have very different forces here. The disposition of the forces is very different. Okay, so we both got 4 hits. Okay, great. Well, the German commander says, oh yeah? Well, I got another round of 10 coming at you. Is that up? No, there's a red die, so we're going to put him back. But we got a lot of yellow here. We got 1 green, a couple of blue, and we got a white. Oops, that was a yellow. That's the one thing about D12s. You do have to be careful. They do tip quite a bit. So we've got 5 yellow. So there's something he can do here. He knows he's got a white and a green. All right, so he knows that he can use that to get rid of the tank. So he's going to use all these on these Russian troops. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Clunk. Just going to move them right out with those 5 yellows. Then we have 2 blues, but as we look over here, nothing left for blue. And then, like I said, we had the green and the white. So we have green and then the white. Knocks him out there. Okay. Oh, that was a harsh round. See if the Russians can hang on to anything here. So the Russians, who have their 25 dice, the second round of 10. Oh, another red. This could be interesting, though. Here we go. We've got yellows, blues, greens, whites, and 2 blacks. Blacks are wild. You can use them for anything. So let's see what we want to use them for. So at this point, the Germans have lost a lot of stuff. The Italians haven't lost anything yet. And so the Russian player says, well, you know, I wonder what might be a better loss for the team here. Should I have Germany get more and more stress, or should I have Italy get some stress? And he decides, no, we're going to pour it on Germany. We're going to try to slow them down. So we got 3, we got 1, we got 2, and we got 3 yellow. Okay? We got 1 blue, but looking here, there's no more blue. We've got 2 green, a white, and 2 blacks. So we've got 1 green, 2 green, the white, and we've got 2 blacks. 1, 2, because you can use them on anything in that theater. So in the surface battle stage, you can't use those black dice to, oh, I'm going to knock down a bomber now. You can't do that. Okay. So now we are down to, each side has 2 infantry left. And this was an Italian tank. I got to remember, this is an Italian tank. And again, this should all be going on to the casualty board, but it's just me here, so this is kind of tough to do. So we'll just put that there. All right, so we have 6 dice left. So we got 4, 6. I'll take our 4 dice here. Do that. Oh, wow, look at all the red. We know there's no blue left. All we have left are yellow, so only yellow, white, and black. And we got 3 of those. And so we'll use yellow, white, and black. Okay, so the Russian force has been eliminated from the zone. Okay, now we'll see if the Russians can eliminate the last 2 infantry here. There's an Italian and a German infantryman left. So if they can kill both of them, the Russians will hold on to the territory, because air units cannot take territory like most of these sorts of games. Here we go. Did they do it? 1, 2, and a black die as well. Here we go. 1, 2, black die. There we go. And that is it. That is the battle. So what we'll do is we'll come back in a moment here and we'll show you what we do with them on the morale board. Just a moment. All right, we have had our battle, and now it's time to count up the casualties, count the cost of the battle. We're going to start first with repair. At this time, anything that is located in a spot that has the white triangle, the red cross on it. Okay, so the damaged is the official term. Anything that's in the damaged section can now be repaired by the country that, of course, owns it. And so the Soviets, unfortunately, have nothing in there. Everything got wiped out. You saw it here live. But the Germans were fortunate enough to escape with a couple of things damaged. They have a bomber and a fighter that are in the damage zone. Now they could just say, nah, we don't want them, and they're done. Or they could say, no, we really want to hang on to these, and I'm sure they would because it costs quite a bit of resources to build air. But it's only going to cost one resource each to fix them. So they can move these over to here, and they will be alive for use next round. Well, in order to pay for that, we go over to this German chart here, and we peg down one for each, so that would be 2. And typically you're going to use the OSR because the OSR is the cheapest and the easiest to get of all of the resources. Oil and iron are a bit more difficult to get your hands on sometimes. Alright, so now what we're going to be doing is we're going to be transferring all of the casualties onto the morale board. And the morale board, this is, I think I've said it before, but if not, this is probably one of my favorite aspects of this game. So we're just going to move this closer so you can get a better look at it. So the morale board takes into account all of those things that we've spoken about already, the stress of war, and how it affects the home front, how it affects production, how it affects your ability to support your units and support the equipment, keep things serviced, keep your soldiers fed, all the rest. And war wears on people on the home front, even if they're not at home, or pardon me, even if they're not at the front. So, of course, the Russians, the Soviets and the Italians and the Germans and the Chinese had the war right on their doorstep constantly as far as the major powers go. And so the people knew firsthand what was happening in World War II. Well, in North America, we were left alone, essentially. There really wasn't much going on. Some sub-attacks, some balloon bombs. There was Pearl Harbor, of course, but even, someone living on the west coast of North America, Hawaii is a world away. And so we weren't facing that sort of trouble and trial. This music kind of matches it very nicely, but I'm just going to turn that down a little bit. So when we talk about the morale and the casualties, the more stuff you lose, the less inclined your people are going to be to prosecute the war. So this game again does a beautiful job of showing that in a very real and tangible way. It's not abstract at all. Now there are two sides to the morale board. There's the Europe/Pacific thresholds. You can see that right there. And then you have the other one, which is the global and Eastern Front thresholds. All right. And so the little mock-up I was doing here was sort of based on Eastern Front, but it could be used anywhere, but we'll just keep it on this side for now. So we have the Eastern Front threshold, and each country has a big white number beside it. All right, so each nation at war, the major empires. All right, so we'll take a look at the Soviet Union has 6, and Nazi Germany has 6. Okay, so when they get 6 stress, really bad things will happen. We'll explain that in a moment. But going back to the battle board, what we're going to do is we're going to transfer all of these losses, and only the losses of course, onto the casualty board. And it's very simple. And you'll see that I did, like I told you, you got to keep these ones separate. So here you have your Italians, and the Italians had 1 tank and 2 infantry get lost during that conflict, and the Germans had the rest of the stuff here, so we didn't bother putting German flags on them. Okay, so we'll take these 4 infantry, we'll find Germany, and we'll put it there. Okay, and then we'll do the same with the infantry, and of course the artillery, sorry here, not infantry, artillery and armor. Okay. The Italians, of course, we're going to put their stuff on. They're not going to get away scot-free on this. So we find the Italian flag and we put them there and there. So those are the Italian losses for that battle. Now the Russians had some pretty spectacular losses, as we saw. They had the 2 that were lost to the strategic bombing raid. Well, they're going to be included in this. Now, typically when you lose stuff to the strategic bombing raid, you instantly just put it on the board. Okay. I left them here because I didn't want to confuse you by showing you 2 boards at once and trying to show how things went. But essentially, you're going to place it right here. Okay. But these fellas here now get to join. Okay. And then we have the 2 artillery and 2 armor. And last and certainly not least, we have the dead fighter. It's going to go right there. So these are the casualties from this one battle. Now, as the turn goes on, there will be other things happening. And maybe, who knows, maybe the Germans will lose the Bismarck that turn. It's possible. And maybe the Italians will send a cruiser out to take a look around and lose the cruiser. That could happen. Okay, so we'll just put those in and we'll see what happens here. All right, so we're going to start with Italy, and we're going to do some pretty simple math. First of all, you got to see how many you've got, and there are 2 there. And then we go up here and we see the casualty value per unit. So per each infantry, because this is the infantry row, that is lost, it's worth 2 points. So with 2 of these, that's 4 points. Artillery is worth 2, but the Italians didn't lose any. But then they did lose an armor. That's worth 4. So we have this 4, plus this 4 is 8. But then they also lost a cruiser. And a cruiser is worth a whopping 10. Well, that's not good. So we have 10 plus 8 is 18. And then what you do is you go up to the casualty list and the casualty to stress conversion. And we look for 18. And oh, we find it right there. And lucky for Italy, they will not gain any stress from this because 18 is the threshold. Some of you, like the first time I saw this, they said, hey, there's no 19, and there's no 35, and there's no 51. Well, to put it bluntly, there are no odd numbers. So it's going to be even numbers all the way up, and there will be those obvious gaps. All right, so the Italians got 18. So we're now going to take these out of here, and they just go back into the boxes, and they're out of the game. The Italians gain no stress. Now let's look at the Germans. Well, the Germans have 4 infantry, 2 artillery, 2 armor, and of course the Bismarck. So 4 infantry at 2, that's 8. 2 artillery, at 2 is 4. So that's 8 plus 4 is 12. And then we have 2 tanks at 4, so that's 8 more. So that's 20. But then we've got a battleship, and the battleship is worth a whopping 20. So that is 40 points. So we look up here to find where 40 would be, and that would sit right there. So that would earn the Germans 2 stress. And stress tokens are very simply these little bad boys here. Little cardboard tokens. So the Germans are going to gain 2 stress. 1, 2. You just sit them right there. There's a good spot for them, pretty self-explanatory. And then these things all go back into the bone pile. Well, let's see how the Soviet Union made out in that last battle. That they held the land, of course, because the air units can't take it. But there's nothing left in the territory, and let's see what's left. Well, here we have what turns out to be 10 units. So they had lost 8 in the battle, but they lost 2 more to the strategic bombing, and those count because you're losing stuff that you've paid for. All right, so that's 10 at 2, that's 20. We have 2 more at 2 each, so that's 24. We have 2 more at 4 for 8, so that's 32. And then we have 4 more for 36. So we look up here and we see 36, oh, right at the start of the 2 stress. Had they lost 1 fewer men, they would have only received 34 and would have gotten 1 stress. But that was a big battle for them. And so it stressed out their country to the tune of that 2 stress. All right. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. Again, you don't do that after the battle. You do it after the round is done. So you're going to have some pretty big stacks. You might have a whole bunch of stuff going on here that just causes you tons of stress. Caution. When you send out bombers and fleets, and if they don't come home, that causes a lot of stress at home. All right, so just be very careful. You know, some people do little, I'm going to do a little goofy attack here, a little suicide run, whatever, ha ha ha. Well, that might be enough to cause you stress. So if you lose a carrier or a battleship, it's insta-stress. Even if that's the only thing you lose, it's 20. And you can see that 20 will give you 1 stress. And now we will show you what stress does. Boom. When you start the game, everybody's little roundels are in here. Just sitting there, happy as clams, and because life is good, you know, war is fun, why not? Let's go have a war. Or maybe, you know, we're fighting for our existence, and so we're not really going to complain about anything because we'd rather be, you know, free and not have the enemy telling us what to do than to be subjugated. All right, and so here we've got these 2 fellas. Now, when you start, acceptable stress, nothing bad's going on, it's all great. But you see these stress thresholds. Again, that is a great tongue twister. Once you receive this many stress, you end up moving a space on the chart. So let's just say that the next turn, the Soviets have an exceptionally bad round, lose a lot of stuff, and they gain 5 stress. Well, that puts them at, of course, 7. Now they have 7 stress, which surpasses this. So what you do is you take 6 of the stress, so there's a 3, 4, 5, 6. You take 6 of the stress away, and you leave that other stress behind. So that you can't say, well, I'm probably going to go over this round. I might as well just throw caution to the wind and get tons of stress because it'll all go away. Nope, they make you hang on to that stress. It does carry over. But now that the Soviets have had that, they will move their little national marker to the left 1 space. That means that when you do the homeland status portion of the program, they will lose any 3 resources. So, you know, looking at the Soviet Union, they're going to lose 3 resources. Again, this is the one to lose if you are trying to, you know, build things that aren't, you know, too terribly expensive. I'll show you the costs here. Well, I'll get into this a little later, but you can see how it matches up. It's red, blue, yellow, red, blue, yellow. You know, red, blue, yellow, it's right there. And you can see that when you're building infantry and artillery, you don't need any oil. You need a little bit of iron for the artillery, but OSR is what you need for everything, but usually in small quantities. When you start building the bigger things, you'll need oil and iron and quite a bit of it. So as you are trying to build things, you want to really figure out what am I going to lose here? Because any 3 resources, well, that could be an artillery piece that they can't build next round, you know, 2 iron and an OSR. So it's not fun. And just so you know, this happens every single round. Right? Well, let's say because of that loss of labor and their resources, the Soviet Union gains more stress the next round because they lose more territories. I'm sorry, I can't remember if I mentioned this, but if they did lose Bryansk eventually, you see that white 2 there? Then that will be 2 insta-stress. So that if you lose a territory and get a lot of casualties, that's a bad thing. So you want to be careful not to lose those. So if they get enough to move again, so if they get another 6 or more stress the next turn, they'll move here. They now have lost some very important things. They're going to lose their ability to use the railroad, which is huge for the Soviet Union, because you can zip things across the Trans-Siberian Railway, but not anymore. And the port advantage, and we'll talk about that when we do a naval battle. Essentially, you get free repair on your ships. Remember how we had to use stuff to, they had to use OSR to get these back? The port allows you to do that for free. Plus, it gives you 2 extra dice. So if somebody attacks you where you have a port, so let's say here, maybe there's a sea battle here, and the Russians are here. They have that port, and that port will supply them with 2 extra dice and allow them to repair their ships for free. Of course, being there, it's going to allow the Germans to do that as well. But if you're here, you do not get that advantage. So you can see it's a bit of a snowball effect, because now if you can't move things and you have to now pay to repair your ships, there's less stuff that you're going to be able to build, and you're probably going to get some more stress because you're going to be losing more and more territory. And now you're going to lose 3 movement orders. This is a disastrous one, especially for someone who's trying to cover a lot of territory, as the Soviets are trying to do. They've got 1, 2, 3, 4 things on the front line. So that's 4 orders right there probably. And then you're trying to bring things up. And you got the Japanese over there causing you grief if you're playing the global campaign. So all of a sudden, this goes from being able to order 9 stacks. Now you can only order 6. Okay? You lose this whole row is gone. And you down to 6. So that's bad. You know, bad. And not only that, you still can't use your rail, you can't use your port advantage, and you're still losing 3 resources every round. Because of this happy word, cumulative. These all add up and they happen every single round. When you get to this point, that's probably game over for you unless you're going to be helped by your allies. No resource income. So you are no longer refilling these handy dandy charts. So even if you're able to make 4 oil and 6 iron and 12 OSR, you don't. You don't get that. Okay? It's a collapse. Nobody's going to work anymore. They're in the streets demanding things from the government, demanding to get out of the war, and production grinds to a halt. All right? Horrible, horrible. And not only that, you're still losing 3 resources. So if you try to hoard things, it doesn't matter, because it's going to get taken away from you. And of course, the last is the coup de grace, which is kind of a good term, I guess, for this. For each stress that you have at the end of the turn, you lose a unit. So, you know, if it were this, they'd only lose 1, but they could be up to 5, and they might lose 5 units. And you just lose it. It's gone, right? So it could be a ship, it could be a ground unit or an air unit, but it's just gone. Is gone. So if that starts happening, you're probably in a pretty bad way. It's highly unlikely you're going to be on the winning end, unless your enemy is in the same boat, as it were. So, yeah, this stress really, really runs a lot of the game. So as you are building units and you're trying to hold on to territory, be very careful. Be very careful with this stuff. I think this is just a beautiful part of the game because, you know, back in the day when big ships got sunk, right, when the Royal Navy started losing battleships to torpedo bombers, you know, over in the Far East, and then they end up losing the Hood to the Bismarck, right, that really, really shook British morale. And there were talks very early on about suing for peace, because they figured, wow, we can't win anymore. All our stuff's old, and we can't support it, and there's too many U-boats out there, and we can't help our people. And there were some people pushing for that quite strongly. Just sue for peace. They'll stop bombing us. They'll stop sinking our fleet. It'll be great. Fortunately, of course, they did not do that. But that really does affect the morale at home. And they did a really great job in this game of speaking to that. Now, as you look at this, the Japanese have the highest stress threshold in the game at 7, mainly because, well, they have 3, possibly 4 natural enemies. They're going to be having to do a lot of battling, and they're going to be losing aircraft carriers and planes and bombers and battleships. All right, so they're going to be crawling up there pretty quickly. The Italians, of course, stress threshold of 4. Although they might lose some naval stuff early on, they won't have the economy to really replace it too simply, so their stuff will be cheap that they'll be losing, and they can't build a lot of it either. America's at 5. That one really is interesting. They're going to have to be careful if they start building, a bunch of cruisers or battleships or something to help control the sea. They could reach that stress threshold fairly quickly. And this is in a global game, of course, because of the global there. And then, of course, China. Stress threshold is the same as Italy's, because all China can actually have are these units here. And it's rare that they'll have armor. Flip this over. So this is the Europe and Pacific, and you can see that the stress thresholds, that's a new tongue twister for drama class, right there. You can see they've all dropped a little bit except for Germany and Italy and China, but everybody else has dropped down a little bit. All right, so if you're only fighting in the Europe or you're only fighting in the Pacific theater, you're just not going to be losing as much stuff because you don't have as many natural enemies. All right, well, I think that describes the battling and the morale board and the casualty conversion and the stress wheel. I'm not sure if that's the right thing, stress wheel. That's just what I call it. Very, very, very important in this game. Please be aware of it and play accordingly. All right, we're going to have ourselves a naval battle, and this is going to take place in A7, which is just off the west coast of the United Kingdom, and of course Ireland. And we have naval fleets for both the Germans and the British, and we also have some aircraft from the British and a bomber from the Germans. So we're going to put that all on the battle board. Something I may not have mentioned in the previous battling video is that stances are chosen in turn order. So who's going first, so in this case the Germans, will place their units first, and then the British will respond. And what I've done is I threw in a carrier there just so we could highlight a little neat thing that the cruisers can do. But first we'll talk about the subs. Subs go down here and they're going to each get 2 dice in the sea battle only. Of course, they have no anti-air capabilities. Okay. Then we have the escort cruiser. Now we could do the offensive cruiser. It would get 1 anti-air and 3 anti-ship. But we're going to put it here in the escort zone. It gets 2 anti-air, but only 2 against fleet vessels. And then we have the carrier is going to go anti-air. And so they're hoping to take care of a couple of British fighters here, because they're going to get 2 for that, but only 1 for anti-sea. Now the neat thing about this is, as we resolve hits, they resolve this way. And so what happens is that if we get to this and the carrier is going to get hit, and as we know, the attacker, like the person who rolls the dice, gets to choose. So maybe the British player rolls that. The German player can choose to do that, of course. All right. But then if it hits again on with a different die, maybe there's 2 green hits, and the British player says, okay, move that there. The German player can say, my escort cruiser is going to take the hit and leave the carrier alone. Now, of course, that's totally up to the defender, but they can do that and keep the carrier alive a little longer. Who knows? But it's always good to check your dice and make sure that it makes sense to do that, because it might just make sense to do that. Because if they only have 1 green and 1 blue, let's say it's in this position, and there's we'll just put these out here like this. There's 2 green and a blue, right? Yeah, absolutely. Take the hit, right? Because 2 green would force the carrier off the board, whereas 2 here would knock the cruiser off. And as we know, cruisers are worth 10 stress points, or points towards stress, whereas the carrier is worth 20. So it's kind of a no-brainer there. Okay, so highly recommend doing that if you can. But of course you might say, you know what, no, I'm going to go after his stuff, so I'm going to have 3. But we're going to do that, and then we'll see how that works. So that's the German fleet. I'm going to say that no Bismarck for them today. But the British, they have come loaded for bear. I'm going to give them... Go. We're going to put the cruiser there. We're going to put one cruiser there. Put another cruiser there. Of course, the submarine goes there. And just so that we can talk about another neat part of this game, we're going to throw a... what do we want to do here? 2, 3... Yeah, let's do that. Maybe we can take down a bomber. All right. So there we go. So that is the British fleet. And then the German will have already placed the bomber, but the bomber really only has one place to go. The fighter, the British can now respond and say, do we want to kill a bomber or try to go after ships? And then we see, well, we've got lots of firepower there, so we're going to go after that bomber. So we're going to put 2 things there. All right, hopefully you're with me so far. Now, what you're going to do is, again, you're going to, let's put that there just to be all thing. We're going to see where it is. Okay? So port advantage. In surface battles, you get +2 dice, and we are in a location that has a British port. This is all attached here, so it works. Okay, so the British are going to have port advantage, and there is no German port attached. Had we been here, they both have. Okay, but here it's only the British. Force advantage. Blacks and whites miss for the side with fewer surface types. Well, as we look at the surface fleets, we have 4 types for the British, but only 3 for the Germans. So when the Germans roll whites and blacks, they are not going to count. They're just complete misses. All right? Okay, so I'm just going to grab the dice and we'll fight the battle. All right, now we're ready to fight. And of course, as with all things, you start with the air battle. Of course, the only things that can get hit are up here. So the only colors we're looking for are red and green, and possibly black and white. Now as we look here for the force advantage, blacks and whites miss for the side with fewer surface types. So we look at the surface types. The British have all 4. Germans only have 3. So again, having combined arms is a really good idea. So now in this battle, the Germans will only will miss with their black and white dice. They won't be able to apply them to the British units. Now we have to find out how many air dice the British are going to use. Well, for that we start here and we're going to look at all the air circles down to the bottom. All right, so we have 1 bomber at 1, so that's 1. We have anti-air aircraft carrier here at 2, so that's 1 plus 2 is 3, and 2 more is 5. And the submarines, of course, nothing there. So they're going to get 5 dice. We'll chuck them in just to get ready. And we'll put the hot spot there, just so we know. The British, for their air, they're going to have 2 at 3, so that's 6. 1 at 1, 7. 2 more, 9. And then we have 1, 2, and another one here. So we have 9, we have 11, 12, 13. And you can see I've already set up the dice here. Okay, so we have that. And you only roll the max you can roll in a batch is 10. And the max batches you can roll are 3. So 30 dice is the most you can roll in any given conflict. It's probably to stop monstrous stacks on the Eastern Front from going on forever. All right, so the Germans are going to roll first. And what did we get here? Well, there's that white die, and it's going to be useless because, of course, the force advantage. The Germans can't use it. But they did get some decent hits here, but we'll see if they can apply them because you can only apply them to the air. All right, so all we need are red and green. And got 2 green, so 1, and of course you can't put 2 units in there. You can only put 1 at a time. So 2. So the Germans with 5 dice were able to shoot down a British fighter. But now the British get to reply in kind, and we know that they get 13. So there's 10. All right. And they get to use their white and black dice. And remember, black dice are wild. White dice kill injured things. So we have a bunch of yellow. Got some blue. Got a red. Got that. Now again, we're only looking for green and red because it's only green and red up here and there's no green. So we're just looking for the red. So we did get a red. Move that across. But we also got a black, which is a wild, and a white, which will kill things in the damage box. So of course that bomber is going to be eliminated, and it will no longer be able to fight for the at sea portion of our program. So that is it with the air portion. We are now on the surface portion. So we're going to reset these, and we're going to figure out how many dice we get for the surface portion. Now the Germans and the Brits, their stuff in the air, nothing was fighting at the surface. Okay, and there's no bombers left on either side, so we don't need to worry about anything above this line. But we do know that the port advantage will go to the British, because it's of course only in British water. A7 is only British. Had it been in here, both of the oh no, that's in the south there, but Norway's there. So both of these are going to be able to be used if somebody has a nope, that's the dividing line, pardon me, between A5 and A6. So in here only the British get it as well. Let's try to find one where they both have. Well, right here, M1. So the Germans have a port here and the British have a port here. So if there was a fight here, they'd both be able to repair their ships for free. But alas, the Germans are not going to be able to do this. And plus 2 dice for the Brits. But let's just go ahead and we'll look at the surface. Now you're saying, well, the carrier already fired. Yes, it did, but you still get to use this. You just see it's a bit depleted, right? So an anti-air carrier launching planes, but it's not going to have enough punch to do much against the... it's going to be launching fewer torpedo bombers and dive bombers. So let's just see how much the Germans have. So we have to come all the way down here. We have 1, 2, 3, and then we have 3 of these at 2, so that's 6. So that's 9. So the Germans are going to get 9 dice to roll. The British, again, have nothing up here, so we're going to move right down. We have a battleship at 4, carrier at 1, that's 5. 2 more is 7. 2 at 3 is 6 more, so that's 13, and a sub makes it 15, and their advantage for having the port makes it 17. So we're just going to set that up there. Now the reason I have the hotspot flipped and whatnot is because the base is the 10, and that's the remainder. That's the remainder there, that's the base. Alright, so the Germans get 9 dice to start, and again, if you keep your dice in piles of 10, you can easily grab 9 dice and chuck it in there. Now remember, whites and blacks don't count. Oh my goodness. Oh wow, that would have been disastrous for the British. But hey, it's 1942 and they need a little love. Alright, so we're going to put these in order here. So we have 2 yellows, we have a blue, 2 blues, and a green. So now the 2 yellows, you're going to take that sub there, and 1 more yellow is going to sink it. It is gone. Okay. And yellow is the most frequent color on the die, so just be aware of that. Now we have cruisers. We have 2 cruiser hits. Now this is where the German player has a choice. He can either, well, he'll damage one of these things, whether it's the top or the bottom, but then he can choose to kill it, or he can choose to kill this thing, or he can do this. Now what this does is it saves the boat, but then the British will have to use resources to repair them. But considering how expensive cruisers are, we'll just take a look at how expensive cruisers are here. So cruiser costs 2 oil, 3 iron, and 2 OSR. Okay, well, that's a lot more expensive than having just a repair with one each. So I'm going to apply that, and it's going to sink the cruiser. And then there's one green die left, and that's going to do essentially nothing because that's all the dice that the Germans are going to roll. So they were able to sink a cruiser and a sub out of that. The British now get to fire back, and they have 17 dice. So we're just going to grab our 10 dice here. Oh, these subs are going to get kind of beat up a little bit, I think. There's a white die. We got blue and some greens. All right. Well, this is a beautiful example of what I was talking about before, but let's just go ahead and do our thing here. So we've got 5 yellow hits. So we're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right. Then we have 1 blue. That's an auto hit there. You have to take, because there's only 1 blue, so the British have to choose that. And then there are 3 greens and a white. So we can say 3 greens, and we go 1, 2, and then the 3rd green. This is where the German can say, oh, he's going to take that 3rd green and sacrifice himself. Yay! Unfortunately, the British have a white die, and they're going to use that to finish off the carrier. Wow. So now this is done. This battle is over. You just do the 1 round. And what you do then, actually no, I'm sorry. Caught me there. We now have 7 more dice for the Brits. Now, if the Germans had more than 10 dice, let's say they had 13, they'd now roll 3 more dice, and then the British. It goes back and forth and back and forth. You don't do your entire side. So if there were 24 dice on this side, you don't roll all 24, right? You just do them as you go, and then as things die, you're supposed to place them on the board. I'm not doing that just because it's tough to do right now. So the British get 7 more dice. They just need a yellow, and they got it. So that's it. So they have swept the sea clean of the Kriegsmarine.
I made a mistake. And I'd do anything to take it back.
Did I just invent a rhyme? I don't know. Maybe I did. Somebody called my agent. All right. Now, we're going to put everything onto the board. And we'll tally up the stress. I'm going to move everything back here. And here we go. So we've got, for the Germans, we've got 4 subs. We've got a carrier. We've got a cruiser. We've got a bomber. And again, you do all this math at the end of the round, but we'll just say they had a pretty peaceful round. The British, on the other hand, lost a fighter, and they lost a cruiser and a sub. Okay, but nothing else. They didn't even have something injured that they need to pay for. So they kind of got off pretty scot-free, if you'll pardon the pun. So then, just like the land battle, you would look at this and say, okay, what do we have for stress? Well, we've got 4 plus 6 plus 10 is 20. So although the British won, they're still going to be eating a stress. So you put that right there. The Germans, on the other hand, they're going to get a lot of stress. So we have 6. Bombers are 6. Subs are 6 apiece. There's 3 there, that's 18. Plus 6 is 24. Plus a cruiser for 10 is 34, plus a carrier for 20 is 54. So we go up there and we see 3 stress. And so the Germans get one of these nice ones. And so in one battle, they're halfway to moving on the wheel of death. The stress wheel, whatever you want to call it. And then at this time, all of these units would head back to where they were, and oh, I didn't have one out. I'm just going to grab a little arrow here. Little arrow. That's for any planes that have moved will be placed. Then you know that they have been active in a battle or in a movement, get to move again at the end. Okay? But you can't, you can only move at the end of the battle anything that's got an arrow on it. So make sure you put your arrows on. And then the British have this nice fleet. They've lost their sub and a cruiser, but they still have a pretty nice 7th fleet here. And it goes back here into A7. Now, this hotspot marker, if there's only one country in it at the end of the turn, because these folks will fly back home, then a medal is awarded, okay, for any hotspot. So whether it's naval or land, you get the medal, all right? So the British get a medal. Yay for the British. And I mean, they can keep it there, or they can keep it with their own gear, and maybe they just want to chuck it in the box. You can do what you want with it, okay? And medals are great. We'll talk about them on another video because there's more to talk about with them. All right. So hopefully, oh, I don't know why that knocked over. Ah! Maybe that is the hood. Okay, there we go. So we have the British now with the fleet here. Again, now they only have 3 types because they lost a sub, so the British commander might say, hey, we've got to build a sub or 2 to replace what we've lost, and that might help steer the economy as well, so that they have then 4 surface types and will be able to combat the Germans or possibly the Italians, who will probably have 4 surface types as well. So you need to be careful because those blacks and whites, we saw it in that German roll. They had, what, 2 or 3 blacks and whites, and that can make the difference between giving your opponent a bunch of stress or not. So had the Germans been able to apply those, boy, that could have knocked the British up to maybe 2 or 3 stress. So, all right, so that is the sea battles. That's pretty much all there is to say about that. Hope you enjoyed it. And we'll move on and talk about metals and consumer goods. All right, well, I can hear it now. People are saying, Hilltop, it's not fair because some countries have this horrible, horrible stuff going on and then they're able to come back from the brink and actually win the war. Soviet Union, I'm looking at you. So, you are correct. Things can get really, really, really bad, but you can recoup. You can move backwards on this chart. Well, how do you do that? Well, you can either build your way out of it or you can win your way out of it. So we'll talk about that very, very simply. Last time we had our naval battle. We had a naval battle out here, and the British won, so they got a medal. And they put the medal in there. And then we'll say that we're going to take the Germans off there. We're going to put the British on because we're using the British as an example. Here we go. And we're going to say that the British won another battle somewhere. Let's say the British took Rome. Because if you take Rome, if you take a capital, okay, that's always got a 1 beside it. So T1, Italy 1, I guess. You get 3 of these. So now they got 4. Well, that's amazing. And then what they want to do was they want to kind of buy their way out of it. You know, things are going good. Everybody's in a good mood. And so what they're going to do is they're going to build themselves some civilian goods. So what civilian goods do, they will help you out on this war track. It's basically saying we're going to spend money on the people instead of the war effort this month or this week or this year or whatever it's going to be. And what it needs is, you can see the 5 there, the 5 with the asterisks, 5 of any combination for the civilian goods. All right, so you can do no oil, no iron, and 5 of these if you want. This is a game we recently played. But you could buy civilian goods. So let's say the British say, you know what, we really, really, really need to knock down this whole no port advantage thing is horrible because we have to repair all of our ships and the Germans are whumping us with these subs. So we need to go back one. We need to go back one. And we need to get back our port advantage. And so the British say, we're going to build ourselves civilian goods. So civilian goods are right here, and hey, they're on the back of those. And the neat thing about that is you just chuck it in. Doesn't really matter whether it's a metal or a civilian good, because now you can use any combination of metals and civilian goods to get yourself out of the hole. But you need 5 of them. All right. So the British say, nuts to this, we're going to use 5 to get ourselves out of this hole. So they pay those back to the bank, and they will now slide back 1 space. Whew, that was a close one. Okay, that was close. Unfortunately, it doesn't do anything about this. And maybe it was one of those things where, boy, we're definitely getting 1 stress next round. We can't avoid it, and we know that we're going to move another spot, but we can't afford to lose 3 movement orders with the British Empire, for Pete's sake. We got stuff all over the place we got to move. And so they just wanted to stave that off another few turns. And again, if you can take capitals, if you win big sea battles, well, any sea battle, anything that has one of these, when you win that, you get a medal. Again, if it's on a capital, you get 3 medals. Okay? So that is how you use medals and civilian goods. Again, they're on the same side, so nobody can say, hey, you didn't build those. It's like, oh, fine, I got a medal then. Doesn't really matter. Okay? Hopefully that's nice and clear for you. On to the next part. Here's the setup. We've got the dice. We know how many dice are being rolled and all the rest. So we're going to go with the air versus air thing going on here. So we have 3 versus the air. We have 4 versus the air. We have 5 versus the air. 6, 7, 8, 9. So the Germans are going to have 9 versus the air. The British versus the air have nothing up here, but they do have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we're going to grab these and put them here. 3, 4, 5. So the Germans are going to roll first, and of course, with 9 dice, all we need to do is leave 1 behind because we've got our stack of 10. Now again, we're only looking for reds, greens, whites, and blacks. So everything else is no good. Well, that is an amazing roll for anti-air. So we've got a green, and then we have a white, and then we've got 3 blacks, which would be 1, 2, 3. That is a devastating roll. Germans were on their pom-poms, the not the football cheerleader ones, but the other ones. Anyway, so yeah, pretty devastating. So the British now are going to reply with 5. Now remember, because the Germans have 4 types and the British only have 3, then the Germans will cancel out all black and white dice. And all we got here is 2 blues and a green. So the green's going to go over there. All right, that's not going to cost the Germans anything because it's not like a real fighter, it's kind of an abstract fighter. All right, now we're going to do the surface battle. And the surface battle is all the blue tokens. So we have nothing up here shooting at the blue, but we do have a battleship. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. So we go 1 and 4 for the Germans. And the British, these were killed in the... Sorry folks, camera is glitchy. Alright, so as I was saying, the ones that got eliminated here are ones that cannot now take part, because they got eliminated in the air phase. They can't take part in the surface phase, so they will not be included. So that's 6 dice fewer that the British get to use. And just to make this technically correct, this is probably what the German would do, would actually to kill these 2 and then leave them with that abstract carrier fighter. Because they still dole out the casualty damage, but they won't be able to repair that one. Alright, so for the surface, we have just 3. Plus 4 is 7, 9, and then there's 9 here for 18. I'm going to take that and go there. But wait, there's more. Because of the port advantage, they're going to get 20. So we're going to move that up there and go 20. Alright, so they're going to have 2 rounds of 10, and the Germans are going to have a round of 10 and a round of 4. Alright, so here we go. Now this is only for the surface now, so if they roll a green, either side rolls green, they can't apply it to the air units. All right. The Germans' first salvo. Whoa, wow. The British are probably happy they didn't bring any subs. All 6 of these dice would apply to subs, but there aren't any, so they're pretty useless. But they did roll some interesting stuff here. They've got a black, a blue, a green, and a red. So you do these in order. So the blue, the green, and the red. Now they have a black. And because the British did not put a cruiser in the escort, they can apply it to either of these. And it doesn't really matter because you only do the 1 round. But they do have 4 dice left. So now they're going to play the odds. Is it likely that we will sink one of these in the next round? It's possible. So they're going to do this. Because, hey, sinking a battleship, it's pretty special. So they're going to see if they can do that. And that is the round. Okay, so the black, the blue, the red, and the green. So the blue was here, green, the red, and then the black moved the red over again. But now the British get to come back with their 10 dice. And the Germans did bring subs, so we'll be applying some of those. Now remember though, the force advantage, the Germans brought 4 types, the British only brought 3, so the white dice, no good. So we have, oh, we got some good hits too by the Brits. Oh, look at this, a little bit of everything. So we got 4 hits on the subs, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4. So the 2 subs have been destroyed. Now we have 2 blue. So that would be 1, 2, because again, you can't stack up more units in there. Then they have 2 green. 1, 2. Now it's at this point that the German can say, wait, no, we're going to apply that to the cruiser, which they might do. But for now, let's do that because it's less odds they're going to get another green and they can't use whites. So it should be safe. And then, of course, there's the 1 red die remaining. And so we'll move the battleship 1 spot to the left. Okay, the Germans used 10 already, so they're down to 4 dice now. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4. Whoa, mystery die. Okay, so again, the yellow is no good. But the black and the green and the blue are going to dole out some more disaster. So you do from the bottom up, the blue, then we have a green, and then a black die. And because the British did not put in an escort that could absorb a hit for a capital ship, boom, they can get rid of that battleship. And battleships are expensive. And yeah. Taking that out of the British fleet is a big deal. So there goes the Hood. All right, we'll say they got fired from the Bismarck, and just to be historically accurate. So with the last 4 dice, that was pretty devastating. Ended up sinking a couple of boats, damaging the carrier, so it needs to be repaired. Well, the British, they get 10 more dice. So the Germans are done. Their dice was there, or their marker was there. The British now have 10 left. So they're mad now. They lost the Hood. Here we go. Unfortunately, they can't use their wild die. Not going to happen. But they did get 3 blues. They can't use, oh, they can use, nope, the subs are all dead, so those are useless. All right. So we got 3 blues, a green, and a red. So the 3 blues would be 1, 2, and now, because they got the escort out of the way, the green hits and sinks it, and then the red moves it here. Now, had the British had 1 sub here, that black would have counted and it would have sunk. But the Bismarck is just spinning around in circles right now. So at the end of this, the British still have this fleet remaining. They have to pay to repair. So they're going to repair that. And then it's going to go back to where it was. You put that on there. These fighters are dead, so they're not going back. This fighter ostensibly will be there, but it's not going to be doing anything. And all this will go on the casualty list. For the Germans, all this will go on the casualty list, but this will go back into there. And now this embattled zone remains embattled. Nobody gets a medal for that, though. And there you have it. So then we would take our morale board, we'd bring it over here, and we're going to load it up with everything that just got killed. We can put the German fighter. It should have been flipped onto the red side there, but it doesn't really matter once you get it on the board. All right, so here we go. So the Germans, a couple of subs, a couple of cruisers, and a carrier. The British lost a battleship, a cruiser, and 2 fighters. So let's do a little bit of quick math. We'll find out who lost more prestige here. Looks like the Germans, but we'll add it up anyway. So we got 2 of 4, that's 8, plus 10 is 18, plus 20 is 38. We look here, that's 2 stress that the British will receive. That goes here. That's half of what they need to move on the wheel of death. The Germans, 2 subs is 6, 2 cruisers is 20, so that's 26. Another one is 46. So it's right in the middle there. So that is 2 stress for the Germans as well. All right. Again, don't do this after every battle. Do it at the end of the round. And then you'll really get a sense of what's going on. That's going to pump these numbers up. I doubt in too many battles you're going to have 90 plus. But in a round, oh yeah, that can happen. All right. And of course, 5 stress is an instant move for everybody except for the Germans and the Japanese. But it's close enough. All right. So hopefully sea battles make more sense to you now. And yeah, hope you enjoyed it. All right, we're going to talk about pinning now, and pinning is a very interesting point of the game, and this is where turn order really comes in handy. And this is where when you bid on turn order and you spend some oil, you might think, it's not really worth it, but you can actually decide the fate of millions by spending a couple of barrels of oil. We're going to talk about that here now. So we'll just say that the British are going first and the Italians are going second, and the British write orders that they want the 28th to go to T5. So they move the 28th into T5, and they want the 18th to go to T5 as well. They're going to have a big, fun shindig here in Libya. Unfortunately, the Libyans have written orders for the 111th, and they want to go into Egypt. Well, they can't do that, because when you are outnumbered or equally numbered to another stack, you can't move. You have to stay where you are. You are called pinned. Now that's for land units. Okay, so if the Italians had a larger force there, they can now move and they can choose to split so that they are leaving an equal number behind as the British have brought in. For the record, this is really hard to do with one hand on a camera. All right, so they can now choose to split this force. Now they will have given orders to the 111th because that's the one that was there. So what you need to do then is put that there and then turn this into the something else. We're going to call it the 112th. Now the 111th, as the Italian player sees that there's nothing left there, they can take it with infantry. They don't even need armor. So they're going to take their weak units in there and leave their strong ones, all this armor, behind to fight. But unfortunately, the Italians didn't foresee the British coming in there, and they wrote orders for the 15th to follow. You're saying, well, you can't, Hilltop, because they've got air units there. Nope, air units do not pin other air units. So they can go in there free of charge. But the neat thing is, you can always cancel an order. And the Italians could just leave them there, and then you would have a fight between these two nations with all that junk there. All right, so that's pinning. You can only pin land units on land. You can't pin air units. Naval units can also get pinned. So if the Germans were here and they're wanting the Bismarck to head out to sea and do something, the British can pin it with a couple of cruisers. Now, of course, when you go to pin, you tend to create a battle zone. a hotspot, as it were. So that can cause grief. You can also pin stacks of troops, and these of course are troop transports. So we'll just say that the Germans are here, right? And the stacks of transport is hard to get through this, right? Now, stacks of transports cannot pin other transports. They can never do that. So if we had a stack of British troops and a stack of German troops, that's okay. They can pass each other, no problem. There's no pinning, okay? But this group of troop transports here is now pinned, okay? They are there. They can't move anywhere, okay? But the one way they can move is if they have written orders to go to a friendly territory. All right, so if they have orders to just disembark into a friendly territory, then they can leave without any hassle. This battle goes on, and they're not going to get sunk at the end if that battleship gets destroyed. Hopefully that makes sense. If you ever have any troubles knowing about the pinning, it's all on page 10 of the rule book. I could do a whole video on this, but it's pretty simple. Essentially, what I've shown you is the pinning on the land, yeah, and pinning at sea, and you can't pin in the air. Air commands can't pin or be pinned. All right, naval commands may pin enemy naval units or troop transports. All right, so they can pin. The exception, of course, is if they're going to friendly territory. Now, if this were happening here, and the Germans had these guys out here, and now they wanted to invade Britain, no, you can't do that. They can only if they have orders to go here or possibly here if it's still friendly to Germany. But you can't escape a naval battle by invading. Okay, so keep that in mind. All right, hopefully we'll just give you the slow burn here and you can take a look. But yeah, it's pretty simple. There you go. There's a few exceptions, but that's as it is with most rules. All right, so that's pinning on your movement. Well, that's pretty much it, folks. There's nothing else that I think I need to go over, but if you've watched this, I know it's a couple hours long, and it took me a number of days to put it all together and edit it together, and yeah, it's been fun putting it together, and hopefully it's been informative and comprehensive for you. If you do have any questions, just leave them below in the comments, and I'll get to you as soon as I possibly can. We know that a lot of people are stuck at home these days. I'm making this at the early stages of the kind of the lockdowns here in Canada for the coronavirus, and fortunately my province, my school district right now is on spring break for a couple of weeks, so hopefully things have calmed down by the time the spring break's over, but who knows, it could go on for a couple more weeks. But yeah, if you want to take a look at the video, kind of zip through, I'll put a little timeline in as to when I talk about different things, and hopefully it's all been clear. But if you do have any questions, ask them in the comments below, and after I've gotten a number of comments maybe asking for clarifications on things, I'll do a clarification video in the future. But this is a great game. I love the different options for battling, and the play between the nations. The convoying is nice and simple. It's very accessible. So hope you've enjoyed this tutorial video, and just wanted to do the game justice because you know, this is given to me. This is the Larry Harris signature edition, and I certainly didn't want to screw that up. So again, a big thank you to Young Grasshopper and Jorn Orpdahl and Moffett Field for making this all a reality, and hopefully it's a good instructional video and people will enjoy it. But as we always say here at the Hilltop Pillbox, hug your loved ones and thank your friends for For just being good friends and for playing with you and you know, keeping the games communities alive. Very important part of our society. And as always, may those dice, even those pesky D12s, be with you.